Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Good Vibes. I'm Martin Falls, and the lovely Debbie Cox-Denova is here again. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
It was a good show last time. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to shift our identity, right? Shifting your identity.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
So this is much about changing your personality, which we've touched on before. We're going to
Stibble.
Yeah. A lot of us just feel like the personalities that we come with are just who we are, right? And we've talked about that before, and it almost feels like the discussion of changing your personality feels inauthentic because this is like, this is who I am, right? I've always been a little bit negative. I've always been a little conservative and shy. And, that's just how I am. But the truth of the matter is that your personality is actually developed. And it's developed a lot through emulation and imitation. It's a product of, we've said, successes and traumas that have happened in your life, and you don't really have a choice about it. But we've talked before about Todd Herman, who is the peak performance coach who wrote the book Alter Ego. And what we're talking about today is actually taking on and developing what Roman philosopher Cicero called the second self. And this is where we use the same methods by which our first self was developed, but we do it consciously in a more empowering way. We didn't get a choice about who was influencing us when we were children, what beliefs they were installing, what traumas were going to happen to us. And so some of us are walking around with really great personalities that work really well for us in life, and others of us feel stuck in a personality that doesn't work, that has you passed by. And so this program really is for you because, again, what we want you to know is that not only do you have the right to change your personality in certain ways, you obviously want to make sure that you're taking note of of nature and things that you cannot change, right? So we're making adjustments where you can. But it's actually your responsibility once you come online to recognize the way that I'm operating is actually not working. All right. So what most people are doing is they're doing what's called self-suppressive escapism. And this is where they take themselves into activities like whatever, Facebook scrolling, drinking, working overtime, so that they can engage in something called cognitive narrowing. And this is where you don't have to evaluate your life. You're so distracted by what you're doing that you just are allowing things to kind of operate. Well, Dr. Joe Dispenza says that our personality really does shape our personal reality. A lot of people are trying to shape their personal reality without adjusting their personality, and it just doesn't work like that. You're taking the old self, trying to create a new reality with that, and your personality is a function of three things. It's how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So as you are thinking, acting, and feeling, you're creating patterns. And we talked about this before. You run 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. And an overwhelming number of those thoughts are the same ones you had the day before, the day before, the day before.
That's very true.
Right?
Did you say self escapism? What's the other word?
Yes. So self-suppressive escapism.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So self-suppressive escapism is really where you're trying to create so much distracted that you're narrowing down and not worrying about actually evaluating the way your life is going. That's where most people are actually. When you can actually, and we talk about this a lot, when you can actually make a routine of bringing the subconscious stuff to your conscious awareness so that you never drift back into the old reality. So that if you're looking to create a new reality for yourself, you can disentangle yourself from the old self and start to work on what Cicero calls the second self.
Doesn't everybody sort of have a little alter ego? You see people all the time and you go, they're acting a little weird. Or they change their game when somebody else is around.
Yes. And so these are subpersonalities that are probably a way of adapting to certain environments. But what we're talking about is actually designing an alter ego that is more authentically aligned with who you are on the inside instead of being performative for people's expectations, like the opposite of what we're looking for.
That explains it. Yeah, because you don't want to be somebody that you're not.
Exactly. And so and here's something that you at home may want to know is that you may feel like, okay, this is who I am. But if it was born of something where you were trying to adapt to someone else's expectations, you were overruling, and this happens for a lot of us when we're children, we overrule our own preferences, our own way of expression in order to fit in order to keep connectivity, in order to be accepted, loved, connected to. And so there's this editing process that happens as a way of routine, of habit, where it's like when you bump up against someone else's expectations of you, or, there is a chance that their approval may be taken away, you push yourself aside and you go, how do you want me to show up? And then you show up that way. So really what we're talking about is taking yourself back home to factory settings. It's about saying, okay, wait a second. This actually isn't, it's what I'm used to. I'm very familiar with it, and we are very conservative creatures who like our routines. We like to continue forward doing what we've already done because there's safety and security in that. But if you look at it and you go, it's actually not working for me. I have a heart's desire to give a TED Talk, for example, but I'm afraid to speak up during a business meeting. That's not going to work, right? Those two things don't work. It's about finding a way to use the original methods that had you show up as this original one, emulation, imitation, but actually selecting for more empowering role models so that you can actually show up the way that you want to. And it is absolutely entirely possible. You just have to embody the second self. And then after the break, we'll talk about exactly how to get to the second self, the strategies there, because there are a number of things that you have to not only consider, but you have to really be aware of the obstacles, both internally and externally, that may stop you from actually living out your second self.
All right, this is a great topic. All right, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. More with Debbie Cox DeNova right here on Good Vibes. Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality. Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights. All right, we're back. Great topic, and we're talking about shifting your identity. All right, so you see Donald Trump, and a lot of people tell me, boy, that guy's just made of Teflon. He's under all this stress. He's still going strong. But that's the way he's always been. He's never wavered. So a lot of people who want to emulate him that are quiet and meek and all that, it don't work.
Well, yeah. And so here's the important thing to recognize is that when it's so far outside of your practiced reality, what can happen, we've talked about this before, is that it can feel like, yeah, right. There's no way that I can go from being this shy, beat down personality to someone who is actually really confident, really well-spoken, very successful in life, right? So if it feels, and check in with yourself, because you may have to ladder it, and that's okay, because you want to make sure that you are able to contain the energy of the new reality that you're creating. So for example, if you're somebody who is really timid and shy and you're prone to beating yourself up and there's a lot of self-contempt in your personality, and you want to take yourself to someone who you see is confident and actually really well-spoken and feels really good in their bodies, it may be too big of a jump to think about Donald Trump. It may be that you actually find somebody to emulate that's around you that is within the vicinity. Okay, well, I can actually show up a little bit more like this. I can actually walk their walk until it feels comfortable in my nervous system, remembering that your body loves that familiar. Your brain and your body love the familiar, right? So once it gets familiar, then you can set a new benchmark and go, okay, now I'm here, and now I'm going to look to this person. But again, check in with yourself, because if there's a feeling of, yeah, right, that is not the one yet. Okay. If you can contain it, like if you can expand your mind around it, it really is the best thing. Now, I want to talk about a psychologist, George Kelly, who came up with a something called fixed role therapy. Okay, and this is a psychotherapeutic method by which we actually try to adopt that second self. Okay, so in fixed role therapy, a person is asked to basically write out a character sketch of somebody that they would prefer to be. Okay, so they write out the character sketch and then they name at least one thing that is significantly different about that character versus them. Okay, now after that, they are basically told to run a private experiment. So if at home you're going to do this, my encouragement is to just do it. Don't announce it, because when you announce it and have conversations with your friends and family, first of all, a lot of times your friends and family they have a whole long history with you of you showing up exactly as you have shown up. They're very invested in continuing a relationship with that version of you, right? And a lot of times it would make them uncomfortable because they feel confronted that they're not changing, or they might feel like they're losing relatedness to you, or they just can't imagine for you what they can't imagine for themselves. So if you choose to try this at home, tell no one and start immediately. Those are the two things. So write out this character sketch of this person. How do they think, act, and feel? Remembering that personality is a function of those three things. How does my character think in day-to-day life? How do they show up in their actions? What are their habits? How do they feel about life? And you're really going to want to get to know them intimately, because you can't get somewhere if you don't know where you're going, right? So you're going to write out exactly who it is, and then immediately for the next few weeks, let's say 3 weeks, practice being that person. Remembering that the Hebb's law, neurons that fire together wire together. It takes time and consistency. You have to practice. Once you practice and your nervous system starts to get familiar with it, you start going, wait a second, this actually feels rather comfortable. And then the name of the game is to continue to do that so much that it actually doesn't feel like you are stepping into something uncomfortable. It actually just feels like who you are, right? And so what that means is that you're embodying. You're not acting like, you are actually embodying. We look at the best actors, they're method actors, right? And what does a method actor do? They actually embody the character. They don't just act like it. Really poor actors are using this outside-in approach. They're actually taking the energy of that character and they're living through it.
That's right. They're living the character.
They're living the character. Now, so if that feels scary for you, because you're just surrounded by people, they all know who you are. I can't show up confidently in front of them. Take yourself into a place where you don't know anybody. A grocery store outside of your little realm, your little neighborhood, or when you go on vacation. These are really great times for you to just take this new character for a test drive. Feel into it. Now, here's the experiment. You are waiting to see if someone recognizes you or says something like, oh, you're really acting differently. If they do that, then you have proven to yourself that you actually can show up differently than you have before. Now, it may feel a little bit unnatural, like we talked about. Sometimes when I work with people in their posture and they have a posture like this, if I tell them to stand up straight, it's just going to feel inauthentic at first.
You just made me sit up straight.
Right? It's going to feel inauthentic because they practiced this. That doesn't mean that it's more natural for their body. It doesn't mean it's more beneficial. It means they've just practiced it. So at first, when you stand up, all of these muscles that were not working before are having to fire. You may feel a little sore, uncomfortable, and inauthentic. But recognize that if your heart is calling you forward in a certain direction, that you absolutely have the right to actually release the patterning, right? And then use the language. One of the things that was said is that, someone who's trying to quit smoking, when someone offers them a cigarette, they can either say, oh no, I'm trying to quit smoking, right? Which places them in a certain identity. Or they can say, oh no, I'm not a smoker. And saying I'm not a smoker is a very different embodiment than I'm trying to quit smoking, right? So try that on, because if you are stepping into an identity that is no longer a smoker, just say, oh no, I don't smoke. Oh, I don't eat that, right? Not, I can't eat that. I can't smoke. I'm trying to quit, but this is who I am now. Really embodying the second self so that you can actually step into a new reality of your choosing.
Wow. Yeah. That's good, Anna.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. There you have it. Great topic, shifting your identity. And we'll be right back next week, another segment with Leona. We'll be right back.